I haven't personally spent a ton of time on how deeply like voice or other things are penetrating into this space. I think in 5 years it's much more likely. I think in 1 year it's not, because there's so many privacy concerns that I think in the short term the willingness to trust it will take a little bit of time.
You're talking about like the personal assistant type stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah,
but maybe were these guys using Siri? Were they talking to their phones? Like that's the kind of stuff that matters. Nick, you guys have any insight into that?
I honestly haven't seen much, but I'll tell you this. All your big technological players, Apple, Google, and Amazon, are highly, highly invested in your personal devices interfaces changing, right? You think about Apple Watch and Google Glass and all that stuff. All the big tech players who have the ability to make the needle move are looking at something where it's not just a computer or phone screen. So gestures, talking, HUD displays where it kind of does a layover on your glasses, whatever the different interface is, they're all working on that and thinking about that. You think about in the cab of a truck as well, HUD in type of information, heads-up display,
Yeah. And you see, if you look at the technology space, you see that in the last year there's been a pretty significant increase in usage of like voice to text and other translation. It's because it's gotten a lot better and edge compute can actually handle it, so you're not actually conversing with the cloud anymore for most of that. They send it up later for analysis, but outside the gate it's usually running on your phone. And I think that'll just get more and more prominent, and it'll get easier, so things become more natural from a communication perspective that way. Again, this year, hard to say, but in the future years, absolutely. That's where the big boys are moving it. To your point, Nick, that's where the big technology companies are moving the interface for people from a consumer perspective. We don't talk about this a lot here, so you might not want to put it in your business more for you guys. One of the things that happened in technology recently, and by recently I mean the last 10 years, they call it the consumerization of IT. Have you heard that terminology before? You guys know what it means? Okay, so it's a pretty common thing when it talks about it for businesses and B2B. And what it meant was that all the way up until about maybe the early 2000s, right before the first iPhone, infrastructure and technology was so expensive, the ones who were actually the bleeding edge and cutting edge were large businesses. They were the ones that could procure it, they were the ones that could advance it, and they were the ones that could scale and consume it. Somewhere around there with like the onset of cloud, mobile devices, and other items, things shifted such that the consumer is the place where you can innovate the fastest. And it's because you can actually reduce the cost of that person. They're much less fussy of a customer than a B2B. So you can drive so much more tests and so much more motion, so much more, I guess, you can drive so much more behavior that way, and then you force your way into business. So, and the iPhone is the classic example. To this day, there is no admin who loves working with Apple devices. They have never focused on the administrative experience like Microsoft did to penetrate the business first.
Right.
Yet, they are coming through because execs will walk in with their phone, go like that, and say, I want it on the network, because that's what I'm using. And that's how they did it. Yeah, and so things have shifted where things are happening. And so that's why I use that for you guys to understand when you go and look at what Google is doing, what Apple is doing, what Microsoft is doing from a consumer perspective, those big boys, that's what's driving the behavior, even what kind of goes going in within trucking. So just big-winded story to say that's kind of what goes behind what Nick said.
Okay, so shifting back to carrier, without like a specific time frame, what do you see? And you can relate this back to truck stop if it makes more sense for you. How do you see a carrier's day changing from today? Like, what does a normal day look like for a carrier, or maybe a week's if people are long hauling?
I'll chime in with one big thing that I think will change. I think today there's two big areas where a trucker spends time today that he will not spend in 5 years. Number one is one of the most common stories is a guy that has a couple trucks, him and maybe he hired one or two drivers, and right around 2, 3, 4, and especially at 5 drivers that I've hired, if I were to be completely spot market, I would have to spend every spare second looking for loads,